meditation was on. Ah, é o Pixel.
É. Oi, Ju.
Oi, tudo bem?
Só um pouquinho, já.
Oi, Ju.
Tudo bem?
Tudo e você?
Quanto tempo?
Pois
Nossa,
é.
nem fale. Faz um tempinho.
Só um abraço.
E agora pode dar abraço.
Pode dar abraço, né? Tudo bem?
Fale,
Como que
você.
tá o país?
Tá bom, tá gostoso. Fui lá.
Você ficou um tempo, né?
Dessa vez eu fiquei 10 dias só.
Uma semana, mas before,
Mas,
você ficou quantos meses?
Essas meses foram 3.
Você estava trabalhando lá, não?
Trabalhando
Like remote?
remote. Yeah. Ainda aqui. Mas aí agora o escritório abriu, a gente tem que voltar a fazer isso.
Nem sei se você é engenheiro.
Então não teve que voltar, né?
Mas... casa, né? Tomara Deus que eu não tenho que ir, que é tão longe.
Bom.
E aí, tudo bom? Né? Ah, então você também ainda trabalha?
Ainda tô, mas antes eu trabalhava perto do aeroporto, do lado, na verdade.
Tá.
Agora venceu o lease e eles fizeram no Southland.
Ah,
Se eu tiver que ir de Early para Southland Park lá no sul, é muito longe. E eu vou levar aqui a 50 km.
Mas eles não falaram. Menos mal. Deixa eu só.
Victor, só uma coisinha. O inglês no Notes. Estava só tem de português, não tem de inglês.
Down right click. No.
Aqui, né?
Isso. Vai aparecer.
Ah, tá aqui. Meu Deus, certo. É que eu acabei colocando em português. Ó. Posso?
Pode só. Aconteceu alguma coisa aqui.
Quer mexer?
Vem aqui no Linux. Vai no stream ali naquela gear. Não, clica no ano.
Sim. Quer mexer aqui? Oi?
Tá?
É que eu não dei ok no WhatsApp.
Então pode dar.
Pode?
Tudo bom? Tudo bom?
Não pede.
Tudo bom?
No Facebook. Os técnicos? Tudo bom? Acho que eu preciso falar contigo da classe, né? Eu tô meio dolorida. Tá bom, mas não tem problema. Esse aqui. Pode pegar no WhatsApp. Ai, esse aqui tinha que aparecer, mas tá bom.
Te mandei um monte de mensagem.
Eu vi, eu não respondi ainda.
Mas pra você assistir, porque me emocionou muito.
Sim, eu vou assim, com certeza. Eu vi que te mandado. Eu tava saindo do trabalho, aí eu tinha umas coisas pra fazer, mas eu falei, só vou abrir direitinho. Deixa eu ver. Ah, sim, criança do trabalho.
Olha que tristeza isso daqui. Tá colocando na casa. Dormimos com feira bem pertinho de casa.
Good. Well, welcome everybody. Good to see you all here today. First of all, a little announcement that we have our bake sale coming up on May 29th. May 29th, yeah. Pre-order by May 26th, but delivery on the 29th, which is a couple Sundays from today. And Carol will be making us pasta italiana in many different flavors. So on our WhatsApp group, you'll find more details on it. It's really good. Highly recommend. And if you could just pre-order it either through the chat or directly through this email here, and Carol will set you up and get you some of the goodies. So to start off, just to harmonize ourselves and cool us off a little, I'm starting with a text from a book called The Way, the Truth, and the Life, from Francisco Xavier. In Portuguese is O Caminho, Verdade e Vida, through the Spirit Emmanuel. And it's just a random text. So this brought us to chapter 132, entitled Going Always Forward. And it's a passage from the Gospel of Peter, where Peter said, "For whoever is defeated by something is made a slave to it." And the interpretation that Emmanuel brings to us is that in order to accomplish the lofty objectives of life, the incarnate spirit needs to recognize his or her role as a learner and thus profit from every experience without becoming slave to it. Money, material needs, sickness, and health are educational situations of immense worth to those who know how to make the most of such evolutionary opportunities in their true essence. Unfortunately, generally speaking, people only recognize this fact when they approach transformation due to the death of their physical body. And very few people go from one situation to the next with due dignity. Usually, whenever rich persons find themselves in a situation of want, they yield to extreme grief and wind up defeated like miserable servants of beggary. On the other hand, whenever once poor individuals find themselves in a wealthy financial position, they often become overly demanding, enslaving themselves to extravagance and tyranny. Much caution is crucial so that such transitory situations do not paralyze the ascent of the soul. Therefore, maintain an upright conscience and dive into the edifying endeavor. Then, whatever situation you find yourself in, you will see it as a chance to go higher and farther. So now let us start with a little prayer. If we could close our eyes and take a deep breath. Feel the connection with our spirit guides. Ask our dear Jesus to be here with us today. Asking him to guide us in our thoughts, in our emotions, so we can open our hearts a little to learn from him, to learn about his love, learn about his dialogue, and hopefully be able to understand his teachings and apply it to our daily lives. Jesus, thank you for the opportunity of us all being here today. And we ask you that you bless us during this time, for the rest of the day, and for many days to come. So be it. Well, thank you guys. And a couple weeks ago, we started a series of talks about mediumship. Something that we usually don't have many talks about, so I figured why not start a series of talks around mediumship. And we'll be doing 6 of them. Today we're doing the second one. So we started with Mediumship with Jesus, where we brought a lot of texts from books from André Luiz to highlight the importance of mediumship and how it is to have and develop our mediumship with Jesus. Today we'll be talking about the loving dialogue with spirits, which is something that also comes with mediumship. And then throughout the next few months, we'll dive into other topics as well. But mainly today is talking about dialogue. And as far as where did we get all the content? It came from a series of lectures that we have called Mediums and Mediumship from a federation in Brazil, in Mato Grosso. And it was given by 2 gentlemen called Lacourière and Jacobson. And also a lot of snippets from Spiritism, from some of the books, like the Medium's book, the Gospel, and a few other books from Chico and Givaldo. So let us dive in. And the first thing is just to, I guess, level the playing field, if some of you weren't here last time, just to talk about mediumship and understanding what is a medium, who is a medium, right? And to answer the question, the Medium's book has a lot of information about it. And in item 159, there is a sentence there that shows that every individual who senses the influence of spirits to any degree or intensity is a medium, right? So the faculty is inherent to humankind, speaking about this ability to sense and be under the influence of spirits. This is inherent to humankind. And then they go on to say that it therefore does not constitute an exclusive privilege. And just wanted to reflect a little bit about this. There is somewhat of a misconception around mediums being special beings, or beings that are evolved, beings that have a higher moral, because we might think that they're privileged. But Kardec kind of debunks that here by saying that it's not an exclusive privilege. Right? In fact, there are very few individuals who do not possess it in the least rudimentary state. So basically, everybody, to a certain extent, is a medium. Right? So again, there's no privilege because everybody is considered a medium to a certain degree. Now, as far as how we use the word, a lot of times we label or we apply the word medium to those who have what we call mediunidade ostensiva in Portuguese, which is those mediums who have the ability to have a more pronounced mediumship, whereby spirits would speak through them, would write through them, would show them images and things like that, right? And one of the most important parts of this is the very last sentence, where it talks about mediumship being a physical organization. Meaning mediumship is an organic faculty. It's completely amoral, as we say. It's just an ability that the body has, regardless of the moral of the person. I like to use the analogy that mediumship is a tool, and what makes that tool a good tool is how I use it, right? The same way that I basically have an arm. That was the analogy I used last time. If I have an arm, it can be used to do an intricate surgery, or it can be used to shoot or trigger a gun. Right? The arm doesn't have any morals to it, but how I use it is what dictates how well the mediumship can be for us. So basically a brief introduction. And with any tool, if we find ourselves with that tool, so if we find ourselves as mediums, we start to detect that we are mediums, then usually we try to look for an expert to help us understand. How do I use this tool? What should I do with it, right? And who would be the expert in mediumship?
I'm a critic.
Who would be the expert of mediumship? He's certainly a very good one. However, in all the, especially the messages that we have from the Spirit's book and the Medium's book and the Gospel, he was never actually psychographing anything from Spirit, but the ones around him. And as far as like the being able to qualify mediums, we usually look at the spirits that are guiding them. So, for example, we say that Shiko was a good medium because he was being guided by a superior spirit like Emmanuel. So if somebody was guided by Jesus, he would be a very good medium. But we can go one step further and think about, what if a medium was guided by God? That would make it a very good medium. So that would be the expert of all mediums. And in the Genesis, Allan Kardec tells us that Jesus was the medium of God. So who's our expert in mediumship? Jesus. He is also our expert in mediumship. And in question 625, as most of us know, what is the perfect standard that God has offered to humankind as a guide and model? And the Spirit's answer to us, look at Jesus, right? So he could be used as the expert when we're trying to look at mediumship, develop this tool that can help us so much. Now, if we start looking at the Gospel, trying to find ways to develop our mediumship, we might not find a lot of details on it, a lot of instructions and things like that. Enters Spiritism. So this is where we can take one step further and utilize Spiritism to help us guide our mediumship. The Medium's book is a great example of it. It's one of the most complete things we can absorb and read to not only learn different types of mediumship, learn how it works, but also the impact that it has in our lives. And why are we mediums? What can we extract from mediumship so we can use it to the best of our abilities? So again, highly recommended. Anybody interested in mediumship, the Medium's book. And just a snippet as well, that just the fact that we are mediums, it doesn't necessarily mean that we will be working with mediumship, right? But mediumship can simply be a trigger or an indication for us to maybe seek Spiritism and learn and be part of it. And if we're talking about all the benefits of mediumship, there are many of them, and I won't talk much about it, but Leon Denis, he brings us a very direct passage by telling us that good mediumship is developed or formed slowly in calm, silent, collected study, away from worldly pleasures and the turmoil of passions. So here we can see that by developing our mediumship, we are inherently developing virtues. So developing mediumship is part of virtue development. So much so that he told us that good mediumship is formed slowly. So by forming our mediumship slowly, what are we doing? We're practicing the virtue of patience. By developing our mediumship in a calm and a silent manner, we're developing calmness, we're developing serenity. Collected study, we're developing discipline, we're developing perseverance, and we're developing, it's the other one with the D, discernment. And then away from worldly pleasures and the turmoil of passions, this is where we start to develop our humility, our meekness, our renunciation, and so on and so forth. So, mediumship, developing our mediumship, is, I guess, the cover, but what's in the background is all the virtues that we're developing as part of that. So it truly can be an experience that brings us a lot of not only information but transformation, moral transformations.
As you said, it's a tool, but a lot of times we think that mediumship is something we'll do for others. Like if I'm a medium, like a more ostensivo, médio ostensivo, that we're gonna do like psychographics or even whatever psychographies or others. It's almost like we think like we have that for others, but with that process you just showed the example from Leonides, it is a tool to help us first to get better, to develop, to work on ourselves, and of course extends around us.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Anna. It's an opportunity that was given to us, and that we can choose to utilize it or not. So everything that we talked about was about our last talk, but I just wanted to, for those of you who weren't here, just so we know. But today we're talking about dialogue with spirits, right? And dialogue with spirits comes a mediumistic meeting. And for those of you who don't know what a mediumistic meeting is, it's where in a Spiritist center we have a meeting where we communicate with spirits. That's what the meeting is all about. There are many different types of meetings. For example, the one that we have here is the one where we receive spirits and we provide them with help, with guidance, right? It's not specific. There are other meetings that are specific, such as more of a physical mediumistic meeting where they have materializations of spirit. That's very focused. There's also one that's called the subsession meeting, where the focus is on freeing obsessions, spiritual obsessions from spirits onto people. And then there are other kinds. So there are many different kinds of meetings. One of the most common ones is the ones that spirit come from to get help. And as far as how it goes, many different forms, but usually we have the medium, who is the person who the spirit speaks through or writes through, or spirit shows images and then the medium conveys those images and things that they're seeing. So that is the medium. Then we have what we call it here in Portuguese, we call it esclarecedor. I can't for the life of me find a translation for it. Another way that we call it is the psychotherapist, or the spiritual psychotherapist, which is the person who is having the dialogue with the spirit. And the focus here today is on the dialogue, so we'll be focusing a lot on that psychotherapist. And then the others in the meeting, they're more for support, spiritual support, where they're often in prayer and helping the whole harmony of the meeting. So that's usually how a meeting goes in a very simple and a nutshell way of describing.
And all the spirits are part of it.
Yes, thank you, Anna. It's
as the image shows.
Yeah, exactly. There are a lot more than we can see that is happening in the background, and that's why that collection of books from André Luiz that talks about the spiritual life is so rich, because the majority of it is describing, not the majority, a lot of it is describing what happens in mediumistic meetings from the spiritual world. So their side of things, how that works. It's really nice. It's really highly recommend. And so, why talk to spirits then? What's the purpose? Why do we talk to them? And there's many explanations. One of them that we wanted to highlight is something that comes from the Spirit's book, question 150, that asks, does the soul after death retains its individuality? And simple answer, yes. Right? We never lose it. Our personality, our individuality is never lost. Right? That is within our spirit, not with our bodies. So that carries forward. And then they ask, how does the soul prove its individuality since it no longer has a material body? And this is something that Kardec brought to us as well. When he said, it continues to have its own fluid drawn from the atmosphere of its planet, and which retains the appearance of its last incarnation, what we call the perispirit. The perispirit is that semi-material thing that goes around the spirit and forms that spiritual body. And that is why, for those mediums who can see spirits, they usually describe the spirits as a human body, right? Usually with a lot of the attributes from their last incarnation. So that's again to show that when we pass on, we carry a lot of what is within. We carry everything that's within our spirit and our perispirit. And then the last question that they asked was, does the soul take anything with it from the world? And he says, nothing but the memory and the desire to go to a better world, a memory full of sweetness or bitterness, depending on how we led our lives. More pure, the better it will understand the futility of what it leaves on the earth. Right? So again, our transition to the spiritual world is tied to our moral development. With how we led our lives here will somewhat dictate how that transition will go. There's a book from Divaldo Franco called The Sower of Star, Semeador de Estrela. And in that, the spirit Sueli describes a suicide in the train. So it was a spirit who committed suicide on the train. And he said that there was a lot of physical pain from the suicide, but the biggest pain was the moral pain that came after the fact of when he realized what he did. But also the pain that came from his wife and his kids when they thought of him. And he said he describes it as being moral darts thrown at his heart by every time his wife and kids thought about him. So this is all to show that we carry everything to our spiritual body. Meaning that, why do we talk to them? Because we're talking to spirits. We're talking to people almost, right? They just don't have a body. But we talk to spirits. And why do they come to a meeting? Bezerra de Menezes actually tells us that spirits, they wouldn't need our mediumistic meetings to be helped. The first reason for mediumistic meetings is for us, for those that are participating on earth of that meeting, because there are a lot of things that we can get from it, that we can learn from it. And when we're looking at the types of spirits that come, a lot of them, many different kinds, but two that Lacordaire highlights is the ones who suffer from having lived a life in sensualism, as if they were thinking a body and not momentarily incarnated in spiritual beings. So those of us who lead our lives forgetting about our eternal spirit, we live for the material thing of today. And that can be many. When we talk about sensualism, that's basically anything that heightens our material senses, right? It can be money, it can be shopping, it can be sex, it can be anything that you can think of, right? That heightens our material sensualism. So a lot of them come to spiritual mediumistic meetings. The other type are those who suffer from having practiced what they call a passive evil. That is, they did not do good when incarnated. So it's not like they actually actively did something bad, but just the lack of not doing something good also brings them to these meetings. And the last one is obviously the ones who are suffering because they actively did something bad and continue to do so. So there are many spirits, there are many reasons why they come. And to remind ourselves of something that Jesus told us in the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew, he told us that do not lay up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be. Right, so again, talking about what are we focusing, I guess, our incarnation on. Is it treasures that can be destroyed by rust? Is it treasures that can be stolen? Or is it treasures that we're building our immortal spirit, things that will carry on with us, things that can be stolen from us? So that was just a passage from Jesus. So throughout our talk now, we're going to focus again on specifics on the dialogue and getting some examples from mediumistic meetings that Le Cordet has shared with us. The first one is a mediumistic meeting that happened with Cordet, actually, from the book Heaven and Hell, where he describes a spirit called Joseph Bray, and this is where they were at this table, at this mediumistic meeting, and the medium was the granddaughter of the spirit that was coming through. So they had a dialogue there. And the granddaughter had the opportunity to ask her grandfather a question. She said, "Dear grandfather, can you tell me how you're in the world of spirits? How you're giving me any useful details for our progress." So this is a question that highlights, I guess, the importance of the community, the connection and the communication with spirits. It's so they can tell us how it is on the other side, so we can learn from their experiences. The answer that she got was, "Anything you want, dear daughter." He will answer anything. And he said that in that moment, I atone for my unbelief. Atone is another way of calling expiation in English. So he's saying that in the spiritual world at that point, he was expiating his lack of faith. Something that he had on earth, and he was in the spiritual world now trying to fix or to improve, right? And then he said, "But the goodness of God, which attends to circumstances, I suffer, but not as you could imagine. It is the regret of not having made better use of my time there on earth." Right? So again, focusing on the things that now he sees that he could have done in a different way, right? And then second thing she asks was how. For have you not always lived honestly? So from the granddaughter's perspective, she was saying, but grandfather, you lived a life that was pretty honest, I thought. Right, you had a pretty good life, so why are you saying that you didn't? And then his answer was that, yes, in the judgment of men, I had a pretty good and honest life. But there's a pretty big gap between the honesty before men and the honesty before God. So this is when we're talking about our human laws and our divine laws. Which ones do we use to lead our lives, right? And here we're guided by both laws. In the spiritual world, we're guided by the divine laws. And so, again, this is just a snippet from Heaven and Hell, just again to show us how we can learn from the experience of others, right? And talking about examples from a mediumistic meeting, and this was a good experience for the psychotherapist. So again, the psychotherapist is that one in the meeting that has the dialogue with the spirit. And this is something that Le Cordet, who was the person who made this talk, he shared with us that happened to him, and it's happened in ours as well. Is when the spirit, they come and they start verbally attacking the psychotherapist, calling them hypocrites. Basically saying, the spirit is saying, well, you're telling me all these good things and all these higher morals that I should attain to. When you leave this meeting, then you go back to your family and you're hurtful to your wife and you're hurtful to your kids and you're not honest and so on and so forth, right? So it's basically calling out the psychotherapist. And this is a great experience for the psychotherapist. It's a great opportunity of learning for the psychotherapist because he could fight back and try to justify himself, or he can take the higher road, which is what Lacordaire told us, that the way the psychotherapist responds to an attack like that, one of the ways, is to say, yes, you're right, and I'm happy that you know me quite well, and you can see that I too have issues. My issues are not different than yours. Right? We all have issues. And that immediately disarms the spirit because it brings everybody to the same playing field. We're all on the same level. We're all equals. There's no more this moral person trying to teach the one that's less morally evolved. No, it's all the same level field, playing level field. So this is what shows how a mediumistic meeting, the intent of it is to be welcoming, is to be kind and loving to all the spirits that come through. So again, a great experience, a great learning, a great teaching for the psychotherapist and everybody within that meeting, right? And the whole purpose of me bringing this talk today is that we're talking about dialogue with spirits. But that doesn't mean it only applies when we're having dialogue with spirits. On the contrary, we can use everything from that we're learning here on and bring it to the dialogue that we have with ourselves and the dialogues that we have with other people. Right? That's the whole point of bringing this thing that we experience in mediumistic meetings. And Divaldo Pereira Franco, he wrote a text from Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, I believe in the magazine called Reformador, and it's called Mediumistic Responsibility. It's a short text. It's got many paragraphs that are very succinct and direct to the point when talking about responsibility of a medium. And a lot of them touch upon the psychotherapist's role. How do we deal with the dialogue? What is the purpose? And so on. So he says that for the psychotherapists of the discarnate, personal balance is essential so that their words are not in vain and are cemented by the example of righteousness and work to which they are fervent. So what are we seeing here that Filomeno de Miranda is telling us? He's showing us that the psychotherapists, those who talk to spirits, they are invited to have a personal balance, whereby they are working, they're making efforts to evolve. They're not required to be evolved and to have all those virtues developed. That's not the point. But they are in the path, right? They're working towards that. So spirits can see that the effort is there as well. And then he goes on to say, your word will be kept in a colloquial and serene atmosphere, dialoguing with tenderness and compassion, without useless verbalism or salvationist presumption, as if it were the bearer of an irreproachable elevation. This is really important, and we can highly apply that to the dialogues we have with ourselves and others, because he's talking about using the language that the person can understand, that the spirit can understand. There's no point in using fancy words to confuse them or to show that you have a higher intellect than them. And then they say the purpose is to dialogue with tenderness and compassion, without the salvationist presumption. Why? And we can spend quite a bit of time talking about salvationism, but the main thing around it, or one of the main things around it, is that when we're trying to conduct a dialogue in a way that we're trying to save the person, first of all, we're thinking that that person is not capable of transforming themselves, of helping themselves, that they need us to save them.